Welcome to Real Estate 360 Live with Ryan Sloper, the trusted name in real estate radio. Now, here's Ryan Sloper.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper. For those of you not familiar with the podcast, my guest and I will cover all angles of real estate, from interest rates to the economy to what's happening in Washington. Anything that affects your real estate and your real estate decisions will be covered here. As many of you know, we're not your traditional, media. We're basically hyping the real estate markets all the time. It's not what we do here. We're kind of breaking things down. We're going to talk a lot about politics, a lot about, economics, the Federal Reserve, and what that means to the interest rates, what that means to housing, and hopefully help you make more informed decisions in the process. If you haven't already done so, please download, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. If you subscribe, then you can continue to get future episodes. Or if you'd like to stream it live from your computer, you can go to realestate360live.com. You can basically stream right from the website there. There's also an Ask a Question button on the right-hand side for any questions or topics that you'd like to cover on future episodes. Joining me on our panel, as he does each and every week, is Louis Camerosano. He's a former teacher, former attorney, and a former general manager of a major real estate portal. He's often cited in the media as a real estate industry expert. He's been cited in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Fox Business, U.S. News, MSN, CNN, and numerous others. Louis, how you doing today?
Ryan, I'm doing grand. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Got a lot to jump into today. We obviously got the Fed meeting this past week. We've got the jobs numbers. We've got the rioting and protesting in Baltimore. Most of what we will talk about today, as we do each and every day, is highly predictable, as we just said before we came on. You and I, it's for over 5 years now, we kind of can look at things and say, there's a couple things that are going to remain constant. The Fed's going to continue to give us this lip service of what they're doing and why it's going to work. And I want to open the show by actually reading. And I think it is important to read this whole press release from April 29, 2015, for the Fed and what they say. And it's unbelievably comical that every time they start to say we're moving back towards their targets and we're starting to hit them, that all of a sudden they just throw in a sentence. And I'll end with the sentence at the end, and then we'll go back and read the first couple paragraphs. But the last sentence of this press release is, the committee currently anticipates that, even after employment and inflation are near mandate-consistent levels, economic conditions may, for some time, warrant keeping the target federal funds rate below levels the committee views as normal in the longer run. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, they keep moving the goalpost back.
Why would it anticipate that even after their targets are met that they would have to continue to do this?
And even after they had zero interest rates for 6 years, haven't raised rates for 10 years, blew $4 trillion on quantitative easings, why would they have to do that? Why would they have to continue highly accommodative monetary policy?
It does. It brings up a very, very big question. Why would they have to continue to do that? And the reason why is because they can't stop. They can't. And instead of saying that they can't stop because it's so far gone that this would be even more of a mess, they'll say that they're going to have to keep it running a little bit longer until what? They have 4% inflation and 0% unemployment? When is it going to end?
They have to say that they're going to raise rates lest they come across as you say, admitting they have no exit, they can't taper the Ponzi scheme, and the dollar would collapse at that point if they basically said, look, there's nothing we can do here. We have to keep rates at zero. We may have to turn the presses back on. Then it would be over. So they have to continue to hold out hope for people that somehow they're prudent. Somehow the reason they can be prudent is the economy is improving, so they pretend that it is improving, so they can pretend that they're going to raise rates. And also, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, another reason is they can't, it ties into the dollar concept that if it looks like the Fed is going to be on perma QE permanent zero interest rate policy, the de-dollarization will accelerate, because then Treasuries will be no better than anything else. They may be liquid now, but as other markets and currencies develop some depth, countries will move away from the dollar. So they have to kind of maintain the fact that they are the best central bank, the most prudent central bank, the one, while everyone else is doing stimulus, everyone else is lowering rates, going to negative rates, the Fed is the shining beacon of fiscal stability and is even going to actually raise rates. Well, that's what they're trying to project, even though they're just as bad, if not worse, than any other central bank. And the U.S. economy is not any better than the other economies, has more debt. And, if you look at those debt to GDP charts, the United States isn't at the bottom of them. They're close to the top. I mean, Japan is higher, can be Greece is higher. But on a grand scale, the fact that the United States has such a large percentage of debt to GDP, and GDP isn't growing, but debt is, that's not a healthy sign.
It's not at all. It was interesting. I was surfing around earlier this morning, and on Zero Hedge, I don't know if you saw it, they had a great little blurb there. The headline was, "Guess who predicted the failure of QE?" And you know what they dug up, Louis? They dug up the Fed minutes from December of 2008. I don't know if you saw this.
No, I haven't seen this one.
These are Janet Yellen's comments in response to Fed Chairman Bernanke's opening comments. She says, and I quote from the Fed minutes, "As Japan found during its quantitative easing program, increasing the size of the monetary base above levels needed to provide ample liquidity to the banking system had no discernible economic effects aside from those associated with communicating the Bank of Japan's commitment to the zero interest rate policy." I think my views on this mirror those that you expressed in your opening comments, Mr. Chairman. That comes from Janet Yellen in December of 2008. We're now in April 2015. She obviously does not buy into her statement from 2008 anymore. They're now quantitative.
But she had said in 2011 that she was in favor of negative interest rates. See, once you go down to use a Peter Schiff analogy with the heroin and the drug addiction, once you go down that path, you adopt that path. In the beginning, before you become a heroin addict, you can talk for days and weeks about why and the evils of heroin, why you would never take it, what happens if someone takes it. But once you start taking it and you become addicted, your whole outlook changes. Not from personal experience, but I mean that's what happens. And once they've become addicted to it, they have to justify it. Or they can tell themselves, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. No, really, next month, no, next year, the fourth quarter. But they really can pull themselves away from it.
I honestly don't believe that Janet Yellen believes that quantitative easing is the solution. I think
she did though, Ryan, when she gave a Time interview when she became Fed chairman, and she said, people think quantitative easing is just for the rich. It's not. It creates, she was going on and a eulogy about why quantitative easing creates a wealth effect. People have more money in their homes. They go out and they spend more. It stimulates the economy. So she bought into it. So she may have cognitive dissonance. But there's enough out there, Ryan, where they keep telling us, look at they did with the, if you review the headlines for the Q1 disaster GDP. What does Reuters have? U.S. economy likely grew at snail's pace in first quarter. But pickup seen. That's in the first headline. But pickup seen. They cannot admit that it was a poor first quarter. There's nothing in the data that indicates that anything in April is any better. This is before they released the the initial jobless claims, which we'll get to in a second. And they basically said the U.S. economy break more sharply than expected, harsh weather, energy they blame. But then they say, but there's signs that things are picking up. Well, they never, ever, ever say, it was bad and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. In fact, the Atlanta GDP now predicted this, as we had predicted that the GDP would come in flat or negative. They predicted about a 0.2, so they were pretty much right on. They're predicting Q2, this is the Atlanta Fed, to be 0.9. So where are there signs that this is picking up, other than this narrative that they keep pushing down our throats for the last 6 years, this media event that there's a recovery? They just don't. They won't give it up. And, you know, and Yellen wants to believe, no one wants to believe they devoted their life for 6 years to cranking out the printing press and it didn't work. They're not going to admit that. It's just like when people go on vacation and it sucks. They're not going to come back and say they had a bad time. They're going to convince themselves that they blew $3,000 and it was a great time. Except that they blew $4 trillion. And they're trying to convince everybody we had a great time during all this 6 years, and we've had a great recovery, and we've got tremendous job growth. We've got, well, we don't have GDP growth, but, you know, the weather happens all the time.
Well, you know, the opening, like I said, the open paragraph for the press release from the meeting, you know, the Open Market Committee met in March, suggested economic growth slowed during the winter months. The winter months, okay? We always have to throw that in there because now we can say that there's a seasonality to the economy, and that's where we can, you know, pin the fault on the weather. And start reflecting transitory factors.
Transitory, it's always transitory.
Yes. The pace of jobs gains moderated, and the unemployment rate remains steady. And it just seems so monotonous, you know, month after month. A range of labor market indicators suggest that underutilization of labor, this is their favorite thing, underutilization of labor resources was little change. They use that little phrase every single meeting. Growth in household spending declined. Household real incomes rose strongly, partly reflecting earlier declines in energy prices, and consumer sentiment remains high. Business fixed investment softened. The recovery in the housing sector remains slow, and exports declined. Inflation continued to run below the committee's longer-run objective, partly reflecting earlier declines in energy prices and decreasing prices of non-energy imports. Market-based measures of inflation compensation remain low. Survey-based measures of longer-term inflation expectations have remained stable. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Same thing, Ryan.
Yeah, it's the same stuff over and over.
What did we say about energy 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago? We said they were saying it's going to be like a tax cut. It's stimulative to the economy. We pointed out the contradiction that they don't want lower prices. They're saying they want higher prices. We were saying lower prices, while they may be good for consumers, why are they cheering it on? Only because it's happening and they wanted to make it look like it was a positive thing. But we pointed out, Ryan, continually that these lower oil prices were not going to be a net positive to the economy because they weren't large enough to help the consumer, because there's offsetting costs that they have, like health care costs, rising food costs, that this gas thing was not a tax cut, that where it was really going to harm the economy was in job losses and slowing down of the energy sector. And they finally admitted that in the last meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
that energy production slowed, putting a drag on the GDP, and now they're blaming lower energy costs for the lower GDP. We said that 3 months ago and 6 months ago, that this was an overall drag on the economy, that it wasn't going to translate into some consumer spending tax cut like boom.
Right.
But they insisted all along that's what it was, and now they're blaming the lower oil prices.
Yeah, lower oil prices
and weather. And you know what, Ryan? We knew there was going to be bad weather in the first quarter, and you and I knew that the lower oil prices were going to be a net drag on the U.S. shale oil economy. And what still hasn't happened yet, which we also predicted should be coming up in the next few months, is the real problem of the debt securities and the hedging instruments on the shale oil companies.
Yeah, the derivative markets, and huge deal. Like, as we mentioned, that there's a lag effect to all this. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over the next 6 to 9 to 12 months that you really start to feel the effects of these lower oil prices. But I mean, I believe
a lot of people are hedged for a year too, so the hedge is fine until
right. Well, and you figure, I think last year, some 40% of the new jobs that were created were in the energy sector itself.
And those are the highest paying new jobs.
Of course they are. And now all of a sudden, don't think that companies aren't laying people off left and right, because
they are.
At the levels that we're at, it's not sustainable to keep, at maximum capacity for a lot of these companies. So that's what they're doing. And okay, great. We got a little bit more money in our pockets now because we're paying less gas. It's not being dumped into the economy, obviously, because you know where it's going. It's going to pay those higher medical insurance premiums. It's going to pay, the higher grocery bill.
Right. What about people who don't even drive? They don't even get the benefit of lower gas prices.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to them.
Well, maybe they have to
Right?
heat their homes, not in the summertime, so there's no benefit there either.
But yet,
We've never thought, Ryan, we've never ever said that that was a net positive, because you know why? Those oil prices were artificially driven down, and it continue to be artificially driven down. They're not based on supply-demand dynamics. Well, they are based somewhat on supply-demand dynamics, but the supply is being artificially boosted against the oil producer's self-interest, meaning Saudi Arabia. And it's also a geopolitical thing to harm Russia, to lower oil prices.
Well, I mean,
it's not a natural, what's the word? It's not a natural market where the supply is being boosted artificially for so long, so hard. Because what normally would happen is you would just cut back on production if you had these such low prices.
Well, it fits in, fantastic with our already artificially manipulated economy, right?
And gold and silver markets and everything else, right? Now they're talking about if the stock market starts to drop, there won't be liquidity. Yeah, well, central banks will have to buy more to back
what is it? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's a joke when they start talking about that there's not going to be liquidity. They can have instant liquidity overnight. That's not very difficult to achieve.
Well, most of the liquidity is from companies buying back their own shares. They're the number one largest buyer of shares, and I'm sure central banks are number two.
Well, wasn't it Amazon that posted some fantastic numbers once again? I was looking at it. I think that it was literally trying to find their numbers.
Not Netflix. LinkedIn tumbled 24% because they didn't do too well.
Yeah, it gained. I think it was like literally that Amazon had gained like $25 billion of market cap after reporting another losing quarter. Right? How is all that possible? It's possible just because, exactly like you said, they just continue to buy back their stock. You don't actually have to be profitable. Doesn't matter. Our whole economy is a joke. I mean,
the best companies are the ones that make the least money.
The fundamentals and principles of a sound business are not there. Who cares about making money? It's not necessary. Millions.
Especially if you get rewarded. I mean, if you're a Zillow or these companies that make no money but yet achieve market caps of $4 or $5 billion, can employ hundreds, if not thousands of people, pay them decent salaries, and not make any money. And then they have the gall to say worker productivity has improved. How?
Yeah.
If you're working at a company, if you got 1,800, 20,000 employees working at a company, and the company makes no money, they're all non-productive employees.
And the Fed's at the center of this. They're at the center of this mess because
cheering it on.
Yeah, they're cheering it on. They're enabling it. They let it continue. And nobody wants to be the guy that steps up and says, this whole stock market, this thing's a farce. The Fed is a farce. It's a joke. It's the Wizard.
You buy a house, Ryan, if you work at one of these companies that doesn't make any money, if you have stock options, you made $1 million, or you make $200,000, $300,000 a year, and you buy a house, based on what? And those house prices were inflated because so many people were in that situation in these Silicon Valley type companies. And what happens when the stock market collapses 50, 60%? Stock options evaporate. People owe taxes on the stock options. They don't have the job to pay it. They don't have the salary. They can't meet the rents. You're going to see an utter collapse in the San Francisco housing market when this thing comes down. But that's not uncommon for San Francisco. Ever since the gold rush, the boom bust cycle. But this bust is going to be much larger than the dot-com one.
Well, it's, and then everybody will claim that they didn't see it coming, right? Like,
everything was going so well. We had 6 trillion eyeballs and 40 million visits. Yeah, you weren't making any money, dude.
Well, and it's
we had traction. We had higher engagement.
It's already set up the language from the Fed, as I mentioned. Even when they reach their mandated target, and to keep it low for an extended period of time. That doesn't.
Right, it was 6.5% unemployment was when they were going to raise rates.
Well, hold on.
Remember that? Now it's 5.5 when they haven't raised rates.
It's 5.5. The jobless claims number that came in, what was it, yesterday, dropped to 262,000, which was well below the consensus of 290,000. It was the lowest level in 15 years. Hold on. But that still doesn't really matter, okay?
Ryan, that was the piece of news that you always predict, that when things look like every piece of news is bad, they got to throw in a good piece of news.
Yeah, and it's the easiest one to just throw out there. I mean, it really.
And it means nothing. There's a smaller labor participation rate, means there's a smaller labor force, which means there's fewer people left to fire. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden the next non-farm payroll is going to shoot up and a lot of people are getting hired absent part-time jobs.
Well, you know,
they tout that number all the time. Fewer people were fired, so more people are getting hired. That is not logically consistent. It's not true.
Well, you know, I'm back to this whole millennial thing, and I keep coming back to it because this is what the media pushes, like as if the millennials are going to help lead us out of the mess. And it's not possible because they can't get a job to start with. They can't get out of their parents' basement. Now, if you're listening...
Wait. Did you see the latest on there was a 1 in 5 millennial parents are impoverished?
Well, I don't want to say that all millennials are this way because I'm sure there's millennials that are successful. But, you know, the majority are struggling to find a job. So I interviewed a guy a couple of weeks ago. This is honest truth. He graduated 2.5 years ago. I said, what have you done in between time? Absolutely nothing. He hasn't had a job. He hasn't had a part-time job. He hasn't had a full-time job. What does that essentially tell you? He's living in his parents' house, paying no rent, doesn't have a job. His skills are, I think, start to erode after 6 months, I would assume.
Well, did he go to college?
Went to college. Small college in the Midwest. Got a degree.
Owes money?
Accounting degree. Owes money. Was going to be a CPA. Changed his mind. Realized that that's not what's for him. Okay? But has no clue as to where he wants to go in life. Now, my question is, how many people do you think are in the same boat? I venture to say quite a few.
Well, people with lack of direction. And the other thing is when there's no opportunity, your lack of direction enhances. Because if there's lots of opportunity, I know, like when I graduated college, I wasn't planning on doing X, Y, or Z, but a job was available in that area. So you just take it, and you never know what happens when you start a job. You may like it. You may not like it. You may meet other people. You may get another job as a result of that job.
Well, Louis, you and I, you know, we're on the same wavelength here. When basically, I think that degrees don't mean shit. Pardon my French, but they don't. And I typically start interviews when I talk to people, when I'm looking to hire people. I start the conversation with that because I'm more interested in somebody's character, their story.
Right.
Where you know what I mean? It doesn't matter to me that you have.
Unfortunately, though, Ryan, it does to so many people. People won't even listen to your opinion unless it has a PhD behind it. And PhDs say a lot of stupid stuff that passes as intelligent just because they have a PhD or they're from Harvard or they're from Yale. No, it's true. Unfortunately, presentation and degrees, there's a credentialed society, and the people with credentials have a vested interest in making sure that those credentials are respected and that people who don't have them are disrespected.
Of course. I mean, credentials, it gives you that level of credibility, and with that comes a so-called authority that you have.
Well, look at Krugman talking about alien invasions. That's going to solve things, $1 trillion platinum coin. He just makes us stuff up, and they say, well, he's a Nobel Prize winner. He must know what he's talking about. I mean, he'd probably view the Baltimore riots as a stimulant of aggregate demand. And, you know, the government should now hire brick throwers to toss bricks through windows because it creates jobs.
Of course it does. I mean, you got to build back all those buildings that were being burned or looted. But everyone knows the fallacy of the broken window we'll post a link to it by Bastiat, basically says that it's a fallacy because you're actually destroying property and it's a net loss because the person whose window is broken now has to spend money on something that was perfectly functional already, and now he's not going to spend money on investing more in building his business or perhaps buying a new suit or doing something else. All it does is reallocate money to an area that it shouldn't have had to reallocate to in a natural way. It's destructive. So now if you say, well, we should go out and break windows on purpose, that's even more foolish. Well, you know, we talk about this, and I told you last time we were talking about, the riots and the protests that take place throughout the country, and now this time it's in Baltimore. These are the diversions that are necessary and required required for them to continue to get away with what they're doing. Sure. I say that
occupies people's thoughts.
It does. It 100% dominates what they think about, what they talk about, and
the modern form of visual circuses.
It is. And, to think. It's
no different than the gladiators battling in Roman times. You've got the cops throwing bricks at the protesters throwing bricks at the cops. People are taking sides. People are cheering on the cops. People are cheering on the protesters. That's all it is.
Yeah, we can't.
No one is trying to say here's a solution, because the solutions are pretty simple. You don't take sides. There's a problem on both sides. You don't riot, and you don't engage in police brutality. Solve both of those problems, and you don't have a problem.
Yeah, but it's easier to.
But having the two of them, having them continue to engage in police brutality and then continue to have riots, that's not going to solve anything.
just like.
But it does keep things going, because then you can go to the next town and stir things up there, because I'm sure you can find police brutality in every city, and I'm sure you can create a riot in every city.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day,
and it's a spectacle, and then if it's a national spectacle, people will want a solution, and that's when they clamp down.
You're right, though. I mean, it is that simple. There's good and bad citizens. There's good and bad cops, right?
That's it. And the issue is, how do you weed out the bad cops and the bad citizens? Not how do you rally behind the cops or rally behind the protesters, or not the protesters, the rioters.
And it's very difficult to do that, I think. I mean, you're always going to have the set of individuals that are corrupt or that are,
Right, but the point is that the majority of people, the people who are watching this spectacle, are taking sides rather than the majority of people advocating. See, they're taking sides rather than advocating for the weeding out of the corruption in the police department and the weeding out of the rioters from the protesters. Instead, they take the baby with the bathwater. They either defend the cops or they defend the rioters. And that's how they make it very easy to avoid the issue, because people either saying the rioters have right on their side, so while we don't agree with what they're doing, they're against the cops, so that's okay. And then the police, they say, well, they shouldn't beat people up, but, we're for the police. So neither side is willing to, they've chosen sides, and neither side, once you're on that side, is willing to see the wrong on their own side. It's just like in politics. Obama does something wrong, it's Bush's fault. I mean, not Bush's fault, Bush did the same thing. Bush does something wrong, he says, well, Clinton did the same thing. Neither side is willing to say, no, what your guy is doing is wrong. What your side is doing is wrong. And maybe you shouldn't even be on that side. Maybe you should be independent. You shouldn't be on the side of the cops, right or wrong, and you shouldn't be on the side of the protesters, right or wrong. But that is the most minority position, because as you say, you go on Facebook, Twitter, you're either on one side or the other, and that's exactly how they want to divide. You're either on one side or the other.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not going to be, the thing that's talked about is to actually acknowledge both sides, right? It's you take the stance, and one way or the other. People don't like people that are going to play, potentially middle of the road. And they talk about this in politics. I mean, it's in everything. I mean, they want these divisions of race, gender, class. They want this.
Party, whatever it is. Exactly.
Yeah, they live and breathe this stuff. This is what they
it's not solutions-based narrative. It is divisive-based narrative.
And look where we're at as an overall country because of it. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And for anybody to think that we are coming out and this is a recovery, it's absolutely asinine to think that. Because
and you know what happens, Ryan, once people realize this? That's when you get the extreme nationalism. People get fed up, and they finally come to the conclusion to what I'm saying, but their solution isn't, let's solve it. Their solution is, enough is enough.
Let's move to Mars?
No. Enough is enough. Let's rally behind somebody who's going to end this. And you get extreme nationalism, or you get an extreme point of view where they basically said, we're just going to crush the other side. We've had enough of listening, whether it's we're either going to go all out on the side of the police, or we're going to go all out on the side of the protesters. And that's what happens. You get either a nationalist or a fascist or a dictator who comes in and basically says, you're going to have certainty from now. It's just like with Mussolini. People necessarily didn't like him, but the trains ran on time. Someone who comes in and just solves the problem by shutting down the other side. And then people are happy with it. It's just like dogs. They need certainty of knowing what they're supposed to do. And that's kind of how politics works. If there's too much disorder and too much chaos, the person or party or people who come in and say, we're going to fix this and offer a decisive solution, whether it's acceptable or not, they win. See, the problem that's happening with Greece is that that party, the Greek party, came in and said they were going to do that, but they didn't do it. They didn't default on their debt. They didn't just give Euro the middle finger and go on. And now that party is going to collapse because they rose to power on the basis that they were basically enough is enough and Greece is going to stand on its own and Greece is its own country and we'll stand up to the EU. Now that they haven't done it, they're going to collapse.
Yeah. Well, and, it's interesting because I've said all along that I kind of firmly believe that there will be that I don't think there's going to be a shift in power. I think it's going to go from Obama to Hillary somehow.
Well, they want to avoid the idea that somebody's going to come in. The last thing they want is the rise of a third party or some other point of view. They like to create this, be on one side or the other, because they can just pander to both sides.
Well, and look who they're catering to. I mean, literally, Michelle Obama's going into strategic towns across the country, as Obama did when he won his elections, to win the minority vote in those locations, to continue to allow people across the borders and then give them, basically citizenship here so that they can turn into voters to turn around and then vote for Hillary. I mean, the numbers, like I said, are astounding when we have basically 44% of all Americans taking some sort of handout. I would say that the odds are stacked against the guy that's not willing to give people more, right?
Oh, no way. That's why George Bush did Medicare D or whatever. They got to give you something to get elected, and what they're giving you is your own money back or your neighbor's money back. That's all they're doing. And people don't realize that. They think they're getting something. They're not.
And it's also the reason why it doesn't matter whether Hillary is a crook. It doesn't matter if only 10% of the money that her charity takes in goes to any place that is respectable.
It matters that she's a woman and that she was married to Bill Clinton, and she might give you something for free.
Right, and she might give you something for free, might give you a little bit more than the last guy.
Right.
It doesn't matter about her record. It doesn't matter about her personal emails. All that stuff, it gets swept under the rug because, as you mentioned, she will be the first lady president, right?
That exonerates her from all wrongdoing, past, future, and present, right?
We are all about making history here, Louis. We are.
Well, that's what's funny. People, when they voted for Obama, they felt as if they were achieving something. I don't know if they're not achieving anything. The president might have achieved something by overcoming that, but an individual voting to think that you're that empowered, that you've created some kind of change, it's self-aggrandizement, I think, to think, I went in and I made history today. Okay.
Well, and to think from when he took office to where we are now, and that's like I said, it's the lost decades, because this isn't the first one that's going to be lost. It's not even Obama's fault. No, it's not.
He just happens to be presiding over it. I mean, there's not much a president can do other than set the tone, and you can criticize him maybe for the tone he set, or you can applaud him for that, but he's not the problem, or he's not the cause of the problems in the United States. A lot of people try to blame the president for everything that happens. It's Obama's economy, it's his. Not really. I mean, there's structures in place that have nothing to do with him that existed before he was there. In fact, he hasn't even been able to get his policies passed. Mm-hmm. In economic policies, he didn't get any of his budgets passed. So he can actually claim the economy would be better if they just put forth his budgets.
Well, we haven't had a budget in how long?
No, exactly. But that's not even his fault, because the president's not even in charge of the budget. That's what people don't understand. I don't even know why the president even produces a budget. It's outside of his scope of his constitutional authority. That's the Congress's job. He can criticize Congress for not passing a budget, But the point is, the president is not supposed to produce one and give it to Congress. That's no different than me putting one together and sending it into Congress. It's just his opinion. The Supreme Court should put a budget together and send it to Congress, too. But that's not their job. His job is to either approve it or veto it. That's it. By putting one together, I suppose what he's doing is saying, look, if you don't kind of do this, I might veto what you put back to me. But people don't understand that. They think, how come the Congress won't pass the president's budget?
Yeah, well, and it doesn't, as you mentioned, it doesn't matter who takes office, right? Because it doesn't matter what they say to win an election. It doesn't matter how they get in there.
When they get in anyway.
Yeah, once they get in there, they realize that it's, the group of guys that surround them and say, hey, whatever you thought this was going to be is not what it really is.
Well, first of all, I have to believe Obama was genuine when he said he was going to close Guantanamo Bay. Then he gets in office and he gets into a room and they tell him, you know what, you're not closing Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, I mean,
and he's like, what? Really... He's like, no, you're going to have to backpedal, you're going to have to delay, but you're not closing Guantanamo Bay. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, and then they explain to him why he can't close it, which we don't know what those threats are, and then he doesn't close it.
Well, and it can come up with all many creative programs, and
he was gonna get us out of Iraq day one, and of course,
and that's
2 years
why
later.
That's why it's better to run on these big marketing concepts of hope and change. Don't actually have a real plan, because that'll get you not elected. You will not get elected if you actually have a great plan. It won't.
Obama wanted not to run on hope and change. He thought, you could see the transition in him. He actually was, in some respects, like Clinton, a policy wonk. He had all these ideas, and they told him, no, you're going to run on hope and change. He's like, well, that's kind of simplistic. That doesn't make any sense. And they said, no, that's how you get elected. And he's like, no, I want to talk about the issues. Like, no, it's hope and change. And that's basically what got him elected.
Oh, of course.
And then he had to give all those speeches about hope and change.
Hope and change. And
so you see, no politician, once they're at that level, they're just marketing front men. If he had gone out and talked about policies and stuff, he might not have gotten elected. That hope and change, they'll stick. You still see them. That was a powerful symbol, and that's what put him into office, not his ideas. He got elected as a symbol.
Of course, and
that's what Hillary wants. She wants to get elected as the first. She may not admit it, but that's why she will get elected if she does get elected, is because she's a woman.
Well,
she represents a new America, one that's overcome gender discrimination and so on.
Of course, I mean she's also came back from almost being broke. Remember, I mean she's a fighter. She's a fighter, Lewis.
I don't know if the American public is going to go. I mean, she just comes across as not genuine.
She doesn't have to be.
I don't know.
I trust me.
It'd be interesting to see what Bernie Sanders does and how he handles her if they have a Democratic debate.
I think maybe my opinions and views have been skewed over what's transpired the last 8 years, and maybe also
hard not to be jaded. I can't really. I don't like to trash politicians, just because by doing so you're kind of saying that others are good, and I think most of them you can find so much wrong with that there's no point in really going overboard on any of them.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, when there aren't like certain rules in place, like setting term limits and things like that would actually make people be accountable, right?
Yeah, because voters don't hold them accountable. They vote 95%. They just return the same guy every year, and then you ask people, what's your opinion of Congress, and they say it's 3% approval rating. Then why do you keep voting for the same guy or the same gal? My guy's all right. Oh, okay.
But that's what I said. It's really not a matter of politics to me, because as I mentioned, it doesn't matter whether we vote for the guy and he gets in, our guy gets in, or another guy gets in. It doesn't matter. He's walking into the same mess. He's walking in.
The mess is outside of politics. Politics are just the way it's implemented.
Well, and I could care less about politics at this point, because it is what it is, and it's not going to change because we say that we're going to vote for one person. It's not, because the system itself is so screwed up that it would take a complete dismantling. And as you mentioned, an uprising, revolts, and these protests turning into deeper and deeper things, because this is not acceptable.
You got to vote for one guy or one woman and then think that's going to solve your problems. The only time that'll work is if you vote for a dictator. It doesn't matter if Hillary is elected or Jeb Bush, unless they're going to come in and just dictate how things are going to be. Otherwise, they're just standing there making speeches.
And, you know, we think that right now housing, I mean, it's interesting because everybody has been hoping that, and I have noticed a significant pickup this spring, which I will say it's a seasonal thing, of people that are buying houses in the D.C. metro area, and I'm sure the major metropolitan areas across the country are going to skew these numbers again.
But compared to last year, though, how is it, Ryan?
And it's not any better.
So it's the same seasonal pickup.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I feel like there been a little boost in inventory compared to last year, and I think that that's been mainly because we've seen an increase in home prices. There's been an
But does that translate into more buyers? Just because there's more inventory than there are more buyers, it just means they have more to choose from. But are they snapping up?
I think that there are more buyers in the lower price range, yes. In the lower price range, yes. You know, and when I say lower price range, obviously this varies from city to city, but let's just call it like in the metropolitan area, in the suburbs, where you could potentially get a house for, you know, $400,000 and less. I would say that there's a very high demand for that. Houses are moving really quickly in those price ranges. And mainly, though, to me, I look at it as they're looking at what they would pay in rent, and they would look at it, you know, what their mortgage payment would be. Mm-hmm. If they can get a cheaper mortgage payment, and they can get that with a low down payment or no down payment, what would you do? But I don't think that it's for any other reason than that. I mean, people know it's a great time to buy. It's been a great time to buy for a long time as far as cost of home ownership goes. But the comment, like I said, I always come back to, it's always people are having these conversations of, do you think it's a good time to buy? Do you think it's a good time to buy? And I'm like, well, what are you looking to accomplish?
Can you buy? It's a better question.
Yeah, well, can you buy? And are you looking to buy a house to make money on it? Because I often feel like that's what's actually going on behind the scenes in their head, is that they have this thing where they want to buy a house at a cheap interest rate and they want to make money on their house in the next 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work that way. But what I've actually seen, Louis, and I think this is going to be something to pay attention to in the coming months, is that these houses that are priced in a range where they're getting multiple offers and prices are getting driven up, well, I have seen that the appraisals are starting to come in low. So I actually think that this is a trend.
Why would that be?
Because it's a way to keep the markets in check without allowing prices to basically rise out of control again. So if I list a house, just give you an example, listed a house for $468,760. Within 3 days, I basically had multiple contracts all above list price. Okay. Now, one would think if I could get multiple contracts above list price, and that's
what the price is, right?
That's what the price is. Appraisal came in at $455,000, so essentially almost $20,000 short,
and lower than the listing price.
And lower than the listing price. Not only could I not get the listing price, it came in that short. Now, $20,000 is significant. You're talking about a 5% variance on that type of profit.
Right.
So that was the first one. Then I had another one. That was an FHA loan. Then there was another one that same week that was a convention.
So wait, what happens to that one, though, if it doesn't happen?
Okay, so here's what happens. It starts the negotiation back over again. Either the seller agrees to lower to the appraised value, the sales price, or they can make a counter offer, basically like, hey, we'll lower the price to this, but you need to come out of pocket with additional funds. Or, you know what I mean? It basically starts that negotiation over. On that particular deal, the seller agreed to lower the price down and get rid of any seller concessions that they were going to pay. Right. And the buyer and seller did agree to move forward on that one. But a lot of them end in...
basically forced the market down.
Yeah, but look at it this way, though. If we have low interest rates and the prices start to rise, but then all of a sudden the lenders and the appraisal management companies get back involved and they say, I don't really like that comp, and I think we need to be a little bit more conservative with our valuations, and they start coming in 5% lower. Do you really think that home prices can continue to rise to the levels that they think? They won't.
Absolutely not, no.
Well, and I thought that this was maybe just an outlier, right? I thought that this one appraisal, because I hadn't had an appraisal problem in 3 years, Lewis, okay? Well, that was the one. Then about 2 days later, the same week, I had a conventional transaction. Sales price was $459,000. Appraisal comes in at $450,000. So that was now $9,000 short. So hold on, it doesn't stop there. That was a conventional deal. Then we went and we had a VA deal on another house that was $316,000. Had multiple offers in one day. Appraisal comes in at $306,000. Okay.
Who controls the appraisals?
Okay, so appraisals now go through for the majority appraisal management companies because a lender can no longer directly order an appraisal from an appraiser. They have to go through a third-party management company that basically chooses appraisers at random. Now, when the appraiser gets sent out there, they submit the appraisal back to the appraisal management company for review, for quality control. If they get it and they look at it, and supposedly now there's these conflicts in appraiser, because I always meet the appraiser at the house to ask them, hey, how many appraisals have you done in this area, right? To make sure they're not out of state. Because I'm not.
And you tell me you point them in the right direction, too.
Yeah, and I point them in the right direction. Well, you know what you get a lot of the time, Lewis? Appraisers that don't want to hear a word you have to say. And it's not surprising, but, when I ask him, so are you familiar with, the surrounding neighborhoods and how, they're very close, very similar neighborhoods and why you should use these as comps. I've already done the investigative work. I've already much pre-researched the 11 comps that I'm going to use. And so he already had it in his mind. He didn't even know what the sales price of the house was. But when they turned, he told me that there's basically these models, computer-generated algorithms and models that are able to go in, take that house, that floor plan, and, computer generate essentially valuations and comps that they feel that the appraiser should be using. And if he doesn't use them, they're going to question why he's not using them and then ask him to amend his report. I mean, these are the things that are taking place. So,
but Ryan, why would they be coming in lower now, today? You said it's because they are trying to keep the prices from getting too high. Why would the appraiser have that incentive?
Well, the appraiser doesn't have his. See, I always, from being in this business for over 10 plus years now, I've always felt like who determines the value, really, right? I feel like it should be the willing and able buyer, right? Now, if I get it. If the willing and able buyer bids something up $30,000 over the list price.
Yeah, but they're using somebody else's money, though. So
exactly. So that's where I can understand that there has to be checks and balances. But when you can't even hit close to a list price, but why do you think it's happening? I honestly just believe that they've gotten 100% conservative on the valuations. I don't think that they want to push the envelope on prices. I don't think they want them to rise. I think
is it because they have liability for putting in valuation appraisals too high? Maybe.
Do you think that the banks and the lenders think that we're in a world of trouble? I think so. I think that they know that there's another boom and bust coming. And I think
especially in the areas like where you are in San Francisco, New York, Washington D.C. metro.
So don't you think that there's a vested interest from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which trickles down to the lenders, which trickles down to the appraisers to keep things somewhat in check so that they can kind of scale back what they consider the risk to be?
That's got to be it. You're right. But it's just funny that it's coming through the appraiser, and what would be the independent appraiser risk? And I guess you're saying is they don't want the liability for having appraised homes too high at the height of the market when maybe in a year or two it'll be 20% lower.
I don't know. I mean, I just, typically I throw things out when it just happens and it's like a one-time shot, but I get 3 in 1 week.
You saw it, exactly.
And I met the appraiser on all 3 properties. It's not like I'm just letting them go out there on their own and come up to a valuation. You know what I mean? Like,
well, they're
literally.
also telling you. It's interesting. They're telling you, no, this is what it's worth, and you weren't able to guide them in any way, shape, or form.
And they don't even bother to call and ask me why I chose one comp over another. When I even gave it to them, I handed it to them.
But were they doing that in the past, the last 4 years?
I hadn't had any, as I mentioned, I hadn't had any problems.
So you never had to kind of guide them because...
Well, I did. I gave them the same information that I gave them 2 weeks ago. right?
Right, but they were always approving the appraisal anyway.
Yeah, I was still not having a problem with valuations because, see, I've always felt like the market dictates the value, and so yeah, you need comparables because a sales comparison approach is how they dictate what the value is they put there for the lender. But at the end of the day, I don't know if I have a house that's the same square footage, Lewis, 2,000 square feet, another one's 2,000 square feet, and I'm listed at 415, and I go under contract at 420 in one day with 5 offers, and you have the other house across the street that's listed at 400, and he's been sitting on the market for 6 months. What does that tell you about the value of the house?
Mm.
Does it tell you that probably it's not as desirable?
It tells you that the other house isn't desirable, but your house is probably worth 405, not much more, but someone's willing to pay for that one and not the other one.
Right, but right? I really think that in the lending business, in the mortgage world, it's a lot different than, like, let's say the car business, right? Where
the car business, they just give cars away. You come in, you get a loan, you drive off that day.
Yeah, but you can't. Like, what I'm saying is, you
there's
can
no
go
appraisal on the new car.
But my point is, you could throw in a $30,000 kitchen in the one house, and the other house just has a base builder model kitchen.
Right.
You're not going to get a bump in price, but like maybe $5,000.
Oh, sure. And we bought a house where the person had put in so much work, she didn't get it back. I mean, you put a sprinkler system in and it cost a few $1,000s. You can't tack that onto the price of the house. The only thing you tack onto the only thing that makes a home price go higher is curb appeal and a few lightning and brightening. We did a survey with that, right, Ryan? I mean, you just clean the place up, and then you get a slightly higher price. You get a return on investment. You put a lot of improvements into a house, granite, all that stuff, you don't get that back.
Well,
at least not dollar for dollar, you don't.
Yeah, all I'm saying is I think that it's something that we should pay attention to. On that same transaction that I was representing the seller, the buyer that was buying the house, he was actually selling a house too, and his agent also told me that his appraisal came in low.
Well, there's also, they're saying, NAR and a bunch, you read the media pundits, they're now not cheering on higher home prices. They're concerned about home affordability, and they've been harping on what we've wanted is they want more sales. You can't get more sales if prices continue to rise, especially if incomes aren't rising.
You can't. And,
they insisted you could, that all you needed was more inventory at the higher price. That defies economic logic. You put even more houses on the market at higher prices. That just means more houses will sit there and not sell.
Yeah, and I think, once again, I don't think that they want home prices to rise much more than where they're at now. I mean, there's not much you can. I don't know. It's just it's an interesting market, to say the least. I don't think there's near as many buyers as there should be, but it's mainly because there's not the jobs, there's not the wage growth, there's not anything that you'd want to see. The savings for people is not up.
And you have higher health care costs, as you mentioned. That's an additional mortgage almost in many cases.
Just higher insurance costs in general, higher food prices, higher education costs. It's across the board. Everything is more expensive. But we don't have any inflation.
No, we want more of it. No, they want more of it. We're not even close to our inflation target. They've convinced us that higher prices are a good thing, except when they don't rise, like oil prices, then that's good too.
Well, we're up on the end of the show here, Lewis, but I want to thank you again for coming on. If you wouldn't mind, give our listeners your blog so they can check that out this week.
Sure, Smallgold, SMAULGLD, smallgold.com. We'll be reporting on the U.S. Mint sales figures this week, and also a couple of blog posts on the cashless society and negative interest rates. So please check that out at smallgold.com. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll be back again next week. If you have any questions or concerns, go to realestate360live.com. Ask a question button on the right-hand side. You can download, subscribe, share on iTunes as well. Until next time.